Do you know what's for lunch?
Chicken?
Chicky. Did he have friends?
They have friends.
All right, so we kick off with a quickfire game. I don't know. No, you haven't got to be quickfire on this, but maybe be quickfire. What is the most hotly debated movie for the Americans at Bump?
Is this about past lives?
It can be about past lives if you want it to be about
I haven't
past
seen
lives.
Past Lives, so I'm not hotly debating it.
Brett has such a strong opinion about this movie. He hated it so much. I loved
Did he
it.
hate the movie or
Okay,
did he
I don't
hate
know
the
if
people in the movie?
Probably both. I don't know. No, I will defend that movie because I thought it was really beautiful, and I had never seen a movie like that in the way that like so much was left unsaid, and like it was like the space that they created, like the acting was so well done. It wasn't just about like monologuing. It really was like you had to infer like the internal lives of people.
So would you say that was the most hotly debated movie at Bump?
I mean, that was a very contentious day when we discussed that movie. So I don't know if there's another one we have in mind.
The
but,
word "cock" was thrown around.
it
I won't
was
say.
for us.
I won't say by who, but
Won't name names. I think it's universal in the sense that people can identify like maybe moments in their lives where they could have made a different decision and it would have impacted how their life would look.
Yeah.
So I think that it's just a bit more kind of the poetic level of like, oh, like what if you hadn't moved to Belgium, or what if, you know, you had moved to New York instead, right? Yeah.
and some representation of that other path shows up in your life and makes you really confront it.
Exactly. And like you kind of get pulled back into that inflection point where you're like, oh, what if I had made this choice? So I think it's universal in that sense.
I hear all this. My main question is, I haven't seen the film. Don't shoot. Did Mr. Nobody already do this better? And have you seen Mr. Nobody?
Which one is Mr. Because people online were complaining that there's an Indian movie that was basically this plot and that they stole the plot.
Mr. Nobody is a Belgian production, and it is, let's just big headline. It's about the butterfly effect. And so it's very much about where choices lead you. It is an across the oceans movie of where people land and in relationships, but it's much larger. So what I hear from Past Lives is it's very related to the relationships that these people have in these moments, and these people come up later in life, right? But Mr. Nobody has multiple timelines, so it's already quite different. Yeah. And it's a lot more archaic.
Okay, all right. So Past Lives was the most contentious movie at Bump. Even if you haven't seen it, you saw the arguments about it. Discussion.
We started punching, so
just got violent at lunch. Fucking
tables were flipped. Tears were shed.
But okay, that's a good segue then into our topic of today, which is Ask Mike Anything. Ask Mike anything about video, because Mike is our video guy extraordinaire, illustrious, storied career. He's about to leave us soon to the Rocky Mountains.
Correct.
But what would you like to ask Mike? What have you been dying to ask Mike? We live at this place just dying to ask Mike questions, and Mike evades them and evades them. Yeah. Now is the time.
It's true. Yeah. I have a Google Doc labeled Mike Ball. And it's all the questions that I just have been like shaking, just dying to ask you.
Knew I shouldn't have come in today. But no, yeah, okay.
I mean, the fact that you're even up in Antwerp is already
amazing.
Week made. But
all right, let me hear these questions. We're like going on. I'm nervous. I need to get okay, please.
No, I mean, Mike, I think something I've always admired about your work is that you aren't just a video person, right? Like you see the whole picture. That's also useful, but I've always just really loved your ability to also translate that into video. So I guess my question is, you know, how do you approach creating those videos? Like for you, what is maybe the most important elements of that strategy and kind of getting us from point A to point B? Because I think there's a lot of pre-production, obviously, that goes into it that we have to do, but it's also the actual filming of it. So there's just a lot of steps involved in that. And so I'd just love to get your take on like, what is your process for being able to make that happen?
For sure. Well, first of all, thank you for the beautiful compliment. I very much appreciate it. We're throwing each other flowers over here. That's an expression in French. Look it up. I ain't here for that. So, you've both been to journalism school, and I also studied journalism and media communications kind of as my base level university education. And then I kind of put video on top of that. And a lot of what you learn, of course, in journalism is telling a story, having an angle, having a narrative. And when you approach video from that lens, to not have too many of these kind of metaphors, you change the way in which you approach the entire structure of production, right? So you start with the story that you want to capture, and then you work backwards from how do we tell that story in a way that's actually compelling, which it's really throughout all different types of video. It's the way most people approach it. And if you look at really well-known directors of photography, some who haven't won a lot of awards, but they still have great work, like Roger Deakins will often say, my work might look really different across a lot of different films. And that's because I'm trying to evoke specific emotions and tell different stories in different ways in all these different places. And sometimes it's not about having this most beautiful shot. It's about having this most beautiful emotion or moment that I see, and to convey that message to the audience. And so having that kind of as a base of what kind of, human connection do I want to start with? And that's really what we also push for, to kind of get people out of the high level, policy, whatever, and bring it back to a human level. Also a very journalistic related kind of strategy, kind of bringing that even down to the video production, just thinking about what can we do to actually tell a story that people will be interested in listening to, not just like reading a paper. So that's the high level of video, thinking about it. And then honestly, as with most things in life, you take where you want to be and you just split it into steps and you work backwards from there. So that's how we always do it.
Cool. Love it.
And all right, well, I was going to ask you a bit more of a pointed question about, is there something that really bugs you or gets to you about the way that clients, people that you work with, see you? Do they just see you as like video guy, doesn't do any of that thinking that you just mentioned? Is there and off the back of that, is there a way that you prefer them to work with you? Like how can we get to the best outcome, basically?
I don't think I have a problem with anyone seeing me in a specific way in terms of the working relationship beyond the trust level, which is that when, all of us are there, but also when I'm there, even if I'm the only one with the client at that moment, trust me when I say that we're going to make this look good and it will work for you. And sometimes that's hard if you are looking, at me or even our other two video kind of producers, so Malta and Jonas, who, are working with us now, and looking at them not just as technicians, but as people who know how to kind of story tell in of itself and create something with the client in the moment, with the interviewee, whoever happens to be there. It's more of a trust thing. So you can kind of feel it. It's not a malevolent distrust of the person, but it's a fear-based, will I look bad? Does this person really care about making me look good and things like that? So it's a lot about kind of creating in the shortest time possible, because sometimes you don't have a lot of time, at least a small level of relationship where there's some trust and, kind of being able to go through that process. Some people can get really in their heads and start the same sentence over and over, or just not be able to get through any kind of messaging at all. At the end of the day, that's really a trust-based problem where you really have to trust the people that you're working with to get you through the process. Yeah. So.
And you wrote a post about that one time, right? About people being comfortable on camera and how to be comfortable. Maybe you could just summarize that for us.
For sure. Comfortability, personal comfortability for anyone who's going in front of camera. I think it's really well known that step one is preparation. So most fear in anything in life, again, goes away as soon as you're more or less prepared for it. Like nothing catastrophically horrible is going to happen in most cases in your life, making videos included. There's not going to be you're not going to have some horrible blemish or some huge that lasts 8 seconds that we cut into the video and all your colleagues are like, what a dumbass, that made me fucking speak. It's not going to happen. And even if you have that moment, we're going to cut it out. But no one has that. No one has the 8-second no one has the horrible flinch, terrible thing that happens that makes the cut. Mm-hmm. So, preparing to know your message so that you don't have to search around for it, kind of preparing what you're going to say in advance, because vocalizing things is really different from writing them down. So kind of in the post, I said speaking in front of a mirror or speaking in front of your phone and filming yourself, reading things out one time kind of helps you break that down into something that works vocally, that otherwise, changing medium really changes how things present. So it works really well written, doesn't work vocally, and then you can break that down. We also really like to do that with clients. We're happy to say, bring your bullet points, bring all the things you want to say, and then we're just going to workshop some messaging and see what works. We're happy to do it in the moment. Gets a little bit back to trust, but so like basically preparation and trust are the two main ones. I'm not going to say just relax, because it doesn't work, right? You can't just relax. But so the things that, the tools that you can do, it's mostly prep and, a little bit of maybe going through your things vocally beforehand can help you be at ease. But yeah.
Nice.
And in terms of Brussels, because most of our campaigns and everything we do is Brussels policy communications. Not limited to Brussels, I guess, but mainly policy communications. Have you seen video progression in that area since the time? Like, how long have you been in Brussels now? Like,
6-ish years. Let's say 6 years.
Yeah.
It's easy. Yeah, I've seen a big movement in policy communications that was originally people would just do reading to teleprompter, like video statements, kind of like, come to our event, it's going to be really good. Like, okay, like people can get that same information from an email, and they don't need the personal connection. They don't need the personal touch of video to like get that message. They can just have an email, come to the event, they'll be at the event. And so I think that people have understood the importance of communication in of itself as, a policy tool, like policy communications to, maybe it's not going to move the legislation forward in of itself, but it will get you the calls with the people that will do that last thing, right? And so I think that people are starting to really understand that. And it's not just us at Bump who are making really good videos. I don't have anything off the top of my head that I can cite, but there's definitely people in the bubble who have really pivoted to kind of more personal story content, things like that, and a bit of a get to know me as an expert content. So there's definitely been a moving away from that really kind of gray suit boring. Yeah.
Like you were talking about, people's different approach to videos, building that trust, kind of what the ideal situation would be for a video shoot. But do you have a favorite video shoot or project that you've worked on during your time at Bump that really stands out?
I think I've had favorite things that we've done just because they've been really fun experiences for me creatively. So the really easy one is Food Drink Europe is a client that we work with a lot, and they really dive fully head first into the trust element. They really trust us to deliver something that's a great experience, a great video, a great piece of communication. And on top of that, their team is kind of like very lighthearted, very nice, and people that you want to know, like to get to know, in a sense that they come across great on video, and so they come across great in communications. All of that bundled together between kind of like Ideas Fest. We've done a lot of really cool content just on filming people around that. But even in the past, we did a kind of mini documentary going around and meeting farmers a little bit throughout Belgium and across Europe and getting their personal stories and kind of turning that into, for the policy world, meet the people who actually make and process your foods. I think those have been really my favorite productions because they also feel like they're connecting the really vague thing, which is this policy, who does it affect, really down to the granular, these people who are doing this specific thing. You can empathize with them and you understand what's going on. So both from both from the image perspective, we get to do really creative, cool things, but also just from the storytelling perspective, which at the end of the day, if you're not telling a cool story, it's not that nice to have a whatever drone shot. It's really about kind of, okay, this story really works and it's really, you can be passionate about it. So that's been probably the best.
I was going to ask if you could maybe just for fun, like walk us through the setup we have here today, because this is like quite a cool setup. I was going to ask you, like, barrier to entry seems lower nowadays for video stuff, and what's your thoughts on that? But like, seems like a pretty complex setup, but
it feels kind of complex. I think you could do it with less. So barrier to entry for video, it's known that it's dropped a ton. And I think that if people are willing to experiment and try things and spend, a significant amount of time on it, but if they're willing to go for it, they can. So this setup's actually really simple. It's 3 of these Rode NT Mini mics, which are just little mics that work with USB that you can plug into your computer. On my computer, I have an app running that records all of them. So already that's completely different from back in the day where you have to have a big soundboard, someone's running it. It's very complicated. It's much cheaper to have these 3 little mics in a laptop. So big step. And then we've just got a couple small cameras, one for me here, one for Ali there, and then a wide one that gets all of us, as well as Habib, of course, and a kind of more primary angle. Then we've got some fun cameras just because it's fun to have weird cameras. So we have like a 360 camera up there. So as I'm pointing to everything, you can actually see what I'm pointing at. And
Attached by a magnet, right?
I think it's a suction cup today,
yeah.
but if it works, it works.
Yeah.
Then we just got 2 big lights. You could use any lights you want, but there you go. You need to see people and you need to hear people. So lights and microphones, probably the most important thing. And even if you just had good lights and good microphones plugged into a laptop, if you really wanted to, you could use 3 smartphones and you can make it happen. So yeah, barrier to entry is pretty low.
Okay, so quick fire question. Both of you can answer. How do you create the right vibe on a set? Ali first.
Okay. I think creating the right vibe really comes down to making it feel as little like a video shoot as possible. Like, I think the magic really comes from when you're just having a conversation with someone and it just feels very organic, rather than focusing so much on the lights and the camera and everything and just getting kind of stressed out about everything in front of you. So if we can get people to ignore the fact that they're being filmed, I think that's kind of that psychological barrier. It's overcome. So I think that that's the best way to create the vibe.
Yeah. Don't say trust.
It's trust. No, so yeah, I mean, basically it's everything Ali said, which does involve some trust. But in addition to that, kind of on the technical side, but I think that Ali and you, Habib, and Brett also do in the moment is kind of over communication of what's happening, because nothing makes people more uncomfortable than not knowing, like, what can they see, how much of me do you see, how do you hear me, and everything. So I think that we really talk people through as we're setting everything up. Okay, we're going to put like the mic here. We see you from kind of your hips up on this camera and from your shoulders up here. And, this is kind of how the conversation's going to go. We can do it a couple different ways. You can break it down this way. So just really verbalizing all the steps makes people feel like not only do they know what's going on, but they actually have some control over the process. So yeah, everything Ali said, plus that little thing.
So basically communication.
Basically communication.
Yeah, what a shocker.
Good. Yeah, we're in the communication business.
What do you do to make people feel comfortable?
What do I do? No, all that stuff. I think it's totally down to the person there. Like if there's a director, it's down to the director. If you're alone, then it's kind of down to you. But I guess it's kind of all about how you approach that situation and person. You kind of need to do these key things that some people would label as charisma, but is essentially just like shaking their hand, looking them in the eye, calling them by the name, like making them feel comfortable, all that like stuff that, I mean, if you're naturally charismatic, then great, but creating a bit of conversation as well. Sometimes that just, you fall flat on the face. Like if you clearly hear an accent and you know where they're from, like if there's someone from the UK and I can tell they're from Liverpool and I'm like, oh, where are you from, by the way? Sometimes they're like, oh, I'm from Liverpool, and we can talk about that. Sometimes they're like, they'll tell you in a way that's like, please stop talking to me. And you're like, this is going to be a rough shoot. But most of the time, 90% of people are receptive and reactive. Yeah. So, yeah.
I think if you go in very warmly and kind, like people respond really well to that regardless of the walls that they've put up. So it makes a difference.
And don't talk about the weather, because there's no threads to grab onto from the weather. There's no interest in the weather. Ask them about their life, their background.
Well, they could be. If they're...
Wow. If it's a meteorologist and they're like, I've been studying that. Yeah, okay.
And one time... And, then
and now
it rained so much.
Could work.
So if you're producing a video, you've been tasked with producing a video maybe by your boss or whatever internally, what are some of the big no-nos, things you shouldn't do?
Well, I'm going to start because you guys work a lot on the pre-production. So I'm going to ask you, what do you feel like are huge mistakes that people can make when they're scripting content or coming up with messaging, because that's really where it starts, right? So what do you think are a lot of mistakes that people make on that messaging step?
I think for me, something that can be a bit challenging is the fact that like a video script shouldn't necessarily translate to, let's say, like an article or even like a LinkedIn post. And I think people don't necessarily understand that the function of that writing is different. So sometimes, it can be that people want to fit, 10 different messages into a 1-minute video, and it's just clearly impossible. So it's really about kind of hand holding a bit through that process and say, okay, what's the one thing that we need to get across in this video? How can we do that to the best of our abilities, and really make sure that that priority is what shines through. Obviously, if they have a lot of messages that need to get out, that means more video content, which is actually better. Rather than trying to cram everything into one short video, we can have maybe a series of videos talking about these different topics. So I think it's just about being able to zoom out a bit, and I think that can be difficult when you work at a company, right? Because you're really in it all the time. So you don't necessarily have that like 360 view of how you could approach it. So I think that that's like a common mistake that at least I've seen in the past, where they need to think of kind of how the video serves a particular function or purpose. And it's not necessarily going to be the exact same function as, let's say, like a blog post or an infographic or whatever it is. So yeah, it's just about understanding the difference of those.
Yeah, I would say like doing all that thinking that you would do anyway around any normal communications campaign about the objective, what you're trying to achieve. Hopefully, I mean, you've already hopefully done enough to realize a video may help us as a tactic for this thing. And then you should define, like Ali said, like what the clear message is out there. In terms of how they would actually go about, like, let's say scripting the video, we've already said we kind of prefer bullet points, but just if they're able to think about it ahead of time. Like Ali said, one clear message would be great. People don't talk how they write. Mm-hmm. So there's that. I heard, I'll just steal her points. I heard a good podcast recently with an former Obama speechwriter. And she was saying how like people don't even realize like we speak in half sentences all the time. Mm-hmm. So she was like, we used to write stuff in half sentences sometimes for him, knowing that he would get the cadence right and the intonation. But one of the big no-nos then, I guess, is trying to be too completist with your messaging, but also with just the thing you're trying to deliver. Like it needs to sound like you're saying it quite naturally. It can't sound. So whether you'd script that all or just think about that and how that kind of embeds itself in the overall strategy. Those are the things I would be thinking about. Just giving it this really clear framework and then having this really clear idea of how I want it to be and how I want to talk if it's me on camera, but not actually over scripting it. And then kind of when we're on the ground doing it, letting you or the technical experts take over and guide me. But then if I'm doing it by myself, I have to do all of that, obviously. Yeah. So those are like the pre-production things.
Exactly. So what about you, Mike? What are the no-nos for you? Like we've done all the pre-production, we've gotten to the actual shoot. So what are some things that are big no-nos when we're actually getting into the filming of things?
So I think the biggest one, if you're going to be on camera, is not being willing to say something all the way to its end, to get really stuck on one little piece. Mm-hmm. So letting yourself have some hiccups and letting yourself create different versions of the message in the moment is really normal, especially for this kind of content.
But just to clarify, you mean by that having like one clear shot at the start, just trying to go through everything at the start rather than like stopping?
Yeah, exactly. So it's exactly that. It's just kind of taking exactly one full shot at it. And the thing is, even if you take one full shot and you make a lot of mistakes, now we know where you're having issues and we can fix them. Whereas if you take one shot at it and you stop 15 seconds through because you're like, I don't like the start. It's like, okay, but we don't know about the rest of how the flow works. So actually, if we know the full flow, we can fix the full flow. But if you're just trying to fix this little bit, it all needs to be cohesive at the end of the day. So that's it's really technical that it's much better to have the full thought and then fix it if it needs to be fixed. So I'd say that's one of the biggest ones. And on the flip side, if you're directing or kind of producing in the back, is interrupting people in the middle of their thoughts or not letting them, being a bit too focused on small pieces and not working on the cohesive full video can be a big mistake, especially if you're kind of new to producing video. You might really concentrate on, okay, that little bit didn't work, let's restart that 15 seconds instead of letting the full thing run over and over again. I mean, even on big budget productions, people improv. I mean, we're talking about movies, people improv, people add new lines, they do new takes on things, and sometimes it's the best content comes out of that improv and making a full cohesive scene or message out of it, right? So that can be a bit of a mistake.
So now you've reminded, if I had to have a big no-no on like during filming or something like that, I would say as well, it's to just, it sounds stupid, but like to try and act natural and normal, because a lot of people have these two extremes whereby either they go uber serious, like they're reading out a full-on script, or like they're a newsreader, or they just kind of get too loud and too excited and too animated because they feel like, I'm a presenter on TV and I need to do all of this. Which, yeah, like sometimes it's just about okay, but usually just like be yourself and act like you're talking to the person who's just off camera or whatever it is.
Yeah, for sure. I think that it's kind of funny that there was a technical reason in the past that actors yelled everything. Right. It's because the microphones weren't very good, right. And everything didn't. So I mean, sometimes they were shouting their lines just so that, you know, they could be heard at all, picked up by the sound people. But you know, this day and age, we actually have the opposite problem on films where people will, you know, speak so silently that they're almost not heard, and the sound engineers have to bring them in afterwards to fix it. But at least it should be the lesson that we carry through to the, you know, comms production side, that, you know, for the rest of the really big budget industry, they're going for very natural kind of like low tones because the technology can pick it up and it's way more relatable to how you actually speak to people. And we're moving really away from the big presenter style. I mean, if you're on a broadcast, like a newscast or something, yeah, you're going to have big presenter style, or if you're doing a keynote, it's obviously different. But for a lot of what we produce, where it's supposed to be like, you know, I don't like the word intimate because sometimes it feels like you're giving so much of yourself away, but it should feel a little bit more intimate, for professional level intimate. You know, having a coffee with someone, that should kind of be the vibe.
Cool. So last question, what are the top 3 things that people ask you to fix in post that you cannot fix in post, or you should really not fix in post?
Well, the first one, it kind of goes back to the very beginning, which is the messaging. If you have a bad script or bad messaging and you try to fix it in post, it probably won't work. Like sometimes we can make something work, but it won't feel, and I mean, for me, it's not that it doesn't feel good for me. It won't feel good for the audience. The audience won't be sitting there and be like, wow, this is a dynamic thing at the end. Like if your content's not good up front, the video is not going to be good afterwards. And if you make a ton of compromises and, you know, you're letting 18 cooks into the kitchen to make the message and you're not having, you know, someone who's really responsible for it, then that can create a lot of problems. So on just the pre-production side, you can already be making some mistakes. Be a bit careful to like guard the golden heart of your message throughout, and don't try to fix it in post by having really lazy pre-production. Second thing is audio. It's really hard to fix in post-production. A lot of weird background sounds or clicking or any issues. And often what we tell people who want to produce things themselves, the biggest technical hurdle is getting really good audio, because if the image is not great, you can kind of forgive it. But if we can't hear what the person's saying, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because we can't hear them. So who cares? So really good audio kind of must be recorded in the moment. And if that's where you've messed up, you need to make it work. And then the final thing is just kind of generally photoshopping out weird things on your clothes or making huge image adjustments. It's probably not going to happen afterwards. We're not really there yet. AI is not there yet. Maybe one day.
Yeah.
Okay, Mike, I have a final question for you. What is your favorite line in Seinfeld or Portlandia? Because I know that you're a big fan of both.
We were just talking about Portlandia, and the line came into my head. I don't think it's my favorite, but it's in the pilot, and it's so good. Which is where Fred has his menu out, and he's ordering his chicken, and they want to know about where it came from and if it's an organic chicken, and he's asking, did this chicken have friends? Did he have a lot of?
He looks like a happy little guy who runs around. A lot of friends, other chickens as friends. Putting his little wing around another one and kind of like palling around.
And I think that the delivery, but also just the writing on Portlandia is so good. So there you go.
Don't they eventually go to the chicken farm to investigate? Like in the middle of their breakfast, they leave to go see where the chickens are stored.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I had exactly the same question.
They do, and they join a cult. It's a great episode. Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert for the pilot of the series. Yeah.